Sean, good to see you.
Tian, I'm always delighted to talk with you.
Thank you for running around for almost half a kilometer in order to reach here.
Oh, half a kilometer. You know, my watch tracks my motion. I've walked 3 kilometers today, so that last half kilometer was completely worth it for this
That
chat.
reflects, Sean, how much interaction people here are expecting between China and the United States, isn't it?
I think that what's really amazing is you would have seen this in the Premier's opening statement, where he said, the largest by square meter, country is the United States again, surprising exactly no one. And so the fact is that that American companies are still committed to China. What I think is really more interesting this year, and you would have seen this as you walked the hall, people have always been here for the market, and this, of course, is the Import Expo, so of course you're talking about the market, but increasingly when you go to the different American companies, they're talking about that, but they're talking about their joint research programs. They're talking about how China is part of their supply chain. They're talking about how they've integrated into sort of local networks and how they're not going anywhere because this is such a part of what they do. So I think that suddenly we're seeing some changes in U.S. engagement, and it's not that the American companies are going away, it's become much more than about simple sales. It's about research, it's about human resources, and it's about deepening connections.
This is critical information you're providing right here, Sean, because there's a lot of media reports about the ambience of so quote-unquote American companies are leaving China. That's not true.
That's absolutely not true, and we have the data to prove it.
Please.
What is true is it's true that investment has slowed, and it's slowed for a lot of reasons. And what is true is that ever since over the last few years, companies have realized they need to make supply chains more resilient. And so they're investing in a lot of places. But that doesn't mean that they're pulling out of China. On the contrary, depending on the sector, companies are investing. But what happens is they're doing it quietly. They're not trumpeting their investments. They're not highlighting it in the various international media. They're doing it with the local government or with the provincial government. And so it's happening. But it's happening, as I said earlier, it's happening for research. It's happening for sectors. We have got a lot of American companies that are part of China's great export success story, right? You're exporting, say, EVs, which has been huge. In those EVs are a lot of American components, and the American companies are having to expand along with China's growth. We're seeing that in the medical and life science sector. We're seeing growth. We're seeing others, but there's a lot of reasons to be investing in China that go beyond the simple Chinese market.
Right. And recently, we see the top leadership of China and United States interacted and certainly had a meeting in Busan airport.
Yeah.
And there are readouts coming from both sides, a lot of contents, and even more analysis about exactly what the readouts mean. What is your take sitting where you are?
What my take is this, is President Trump was never as hawkish as many other members of his party or as many other members of his administration. And this was the first time he was able to sit down with President Xi to say, yeah, I know we've got a lot of problems between us. Some of it has to do with export controls. Some of it has to do with fentanyl. Some of it has to do with tariffs. Let's see how we can get beyond that. And so what I think is this was a sincere attempt by President Trump to reset the relationship. And I've got a lot of respect for the Chinese side, particularly President Xi, who said, okay, if that's what you want to do, we will reset this relationship, because what we have is we have the two presidents realize that we are the world's 2 largest economies. We're the world's 2 most dynamic economies, the most technologically advanced economies, and we can hurt each other really badly through sanctions, through tariffs, or we can create a relationship that benefits people on both sides. And I think that's what the 2 leaders want to do. Now, the question is, can it last?
Indeed.
Will it break down? I mean, we saw what happened after Geneva. Geneva lasted, we were happy and giving each other, high fives, as we say, for a couple of days, and then things broke down. We were feeling the same way after Madrid, and then after the 2 presidents spoke, and then it broke down. So everyone is looking, can it do better this time?
What does it take to do better?
What does it take to do better? I think that what it takes is that on the U.S. side, the U.S. side needs to make sure that what it does is more predictable and transparent to the Chinese side. I think that when we look back over the last couple of months where we've had challenges, both sides have done things that are challenging to the other side. But I think right now, the beauty of the Chinese system is if President Xi says, we have made this agreement and this is what we're going to do, we believe that China at all levels is going to follow through. On the U.S. side, that's not always how the U.S. government works. And so that's what we need to see on the U.S. side, is we need to see that everyone on the U.S. government side says, this is what President Trump has said, this is what he wants, and we're going to follow through with that. And so I think if we get to April, remember, Trump said he wants to visit in April.
Right.
If we get to April and that visit happens, it means a lot of things went right. And I think once we get to April, a lot of people will breathe a sigh of relief and say, now we can really have confidence that this is stable. Until then, we're going to be concerned.
How much do you think American business are going to take advantage of this window opportunity? Borrowing your words, from now until April, let's just say that is the case. How is this window opportunity going to be taken advantage of in a better way?
The first part of it is every 90 days, the two sides were having to agree, do we extend or do we not? So now everybody is fairly confident that this 90-day cycle we've passed that. And so that's good.
Thank God for that. People are exhausted.
Oh my goodness. Yes, they are. But here's the thing. And it hurts to say this in some ways, but the uncertainty was never on the Chinese side. American companies mostly aren't in China because they're exporting primarily to the U.S. They're in China because it's part of their supply chain, or they're selling into China, or they're building in China and selling to the world and to other places. And so what was really hurting them was their U.S. side, where we had this unpredictability of what's going to happen with tariffs. But back to my earlier point about investment in China, right? As we've said, just like Chinese companies have been diversifying their supply chain and investing into places like Southeast Asia or to Mexico.
Global South.
American companies have been doing the same thing. But now that has slowed if you're an American company. Why? Because if you are spending capital to build plants and equipments in Southeast Asia, now you don't know what the tariffs are going to be there. But you're pretty sure now you know what the tariffs are going to be in China. So what we've seen is earlier where we're seeing investment that might have gone into China going to other areas. Now that other part has slowed, and China has become the sort of center of predictability. And that's not where I thought we would be last January, where I thought we'd be last February. But I think now China is where things are predictable and not Southeast Asia or elsewhere. So I think that's the window of opportunity.
Both sides in their readouts, I've been trying to read the readouts, by the way, over the past few days, they specifically mentioned try to seek the common ground. Now, this takes a lot of creativity. Where the common grounds are, and make those common grounds sustainable so that other areas of connected benefits can be earned. So on that, as a business leader, as someone who has been working with the business community, what is your thought?
So my thoughts are there's a huge amount of common ground, and there are impediments in both countries to reaching that common ground. One example of that was with American agriculture products, right? China wants to buy American agriculture products. Why? Because when you don't buy American agriculture, prices go up. But because of U.S. tariffs, you couldn't do that. So that was one bit of common ground. But I think other areas, if you look at what President Trump is trying to do, he's trying to rebuild and reindustrialize the United States. If there's a perfect partner for some of that, that's going to be China. And I think Chinese companies want to invest in the United States. Now, certainly there are sensitive sectors, or there are areas where maybe there are security issues or other types of things, but there's a lot of areas where that's just not the case. And I think Chinese companies want to invest in the United States, and I think the U.S. government is trying to have that happen as well. So I think that's something that we can see as some common ground.
Chinese ambassador to the United States, Mr. Xie Feng, mentioned recently in a speech given to exactly your constituency, talking about 4 issues: Taiwan, democracy, political system, and also some deeper connections between China and the United States being the very bottom line that shouldn't be hurt between the two countries. Now, your take on that, how much mutual respect will the two sides have?
Well, so I was really pleased to see that after the meeting in Seoul, which I think was really good for both sides, the meeting in Busan, that was really good for both sides. And it stopped a lot of really bad things from potentially happening to the countries getting to this sort of spiral. But I think what we saw right afterwards, we saw President Trump call the Secretary of Defense. Now, the Secretary of Defense, that's an important job, right? If there's someone who is going to be a hawk about everything in the world, that's the Secretary of Defense job, just like it is in China, right? And we saw after that conversation, the Secretary of Defense put out a message that said, I have spoken to the president and we agree on China. We agree that we need to move forward with more contact. And we agree with that. And so the message that I take away from that is China has got a lot of red lines. The U.S. has got red lines. But that the vision of cooperation that was expressed between the two presidents, on the U.S. side, the U.S. president is trying to get the U.S. side to make sure that we are respecting, sort of our values, but also not needlessly crossing over into Chinese red lines. And so I think that's really positive.
Sean, it's such a pleasure seeing you.
I always enjoy talking to you.